Supervisor Poitras, can you hear us?
Yes, I can.
Thank
Hello.
you. We'll be right with you.
Thank you.
So wait a minute. Just
Okay, you guys, let's get her going.
Let's go.
Thank you, Rob.
But I'm going to anyway.
Right. Like it or not.
ready.
Funny man.
Are we ready?
We are ready.
Okay. Let's open this meeting at 9:03 or 4, somewhere in that time. And it's a great, beautiful day again without no more rain, which sucks, but we're going to go on. So, is there any additions to our agenda?
Yes, Chairman, there is one addition. We were contacted late yesterday afternoon by the Madera County Arts Council. They need a resolution related to a grant application they're completing today. The resolution designates the Madera Arts Council as the county's partner, approving the application for and authorizing execution of a grant with the California Arts Council. So I would request that the board consider adding that to today's
I move
agenda.
that we add the item finding that it came to our attention after the posting of the agenda.
Second.
Okay, let's do a roll call. We need to do a roll call anyway for the who's here and who isn't. So let's do
You
a
want 'em
roll call
separate?
let's do a public roll call to who's supervisors, because Rob's online looking at us. So
Supervisor Frazier,
Yes, I'm here.
Supervisor Rogers,
Yes.
Supervisor Poitras,
Yes.
Supervisor Gonzalez,
Here.
Chairman Wheeler,
yes, here, I mean. Okay,
And in
now
regards
roll
to the
call
vote?
for the addition of the Art Council grant.
Supervisor Frazier,
Yes.
Supervisor Rogers,
Yes.
Supervisor Poitras,
Yes.
Supervisor Gonzalez,
Yes.
Chairman Wheeler.
Yes.
Vote passes 5-0.
Okay, that's only addition.
Yes, sir.
Okay, and so we'll, council, could you read in the closed session items, please?
Thank you, Chairman Wheeler. We have two closed session items noted as 2A and 2B on the written agenda. Both are conferences with legal counsel for existing litigation pursuant to Government Code Section 54956.9, Subdivision D1. First case is Madera Irrigation District and the Madera Irrigation District Groundwater Sustainability Agency versus the Madera County Groundwater Sustainability Agency, Madera County Board of Supervisors, and the County of Madera. Madera County Superior Court case number MCV 086277. The second case is Elizabeth Cardoza et al. Versus Madera County Groundwater Sustainability Agency, Madera County Superior Court case number, I need to correct it from the agenda, it's actually MCV 086218.
We've got an 8 in there.
Yes.
Okay, we got that, but I was just informed that we got to go ahead and vote so we can, on that grant, so they can get it in. It's got to be in today. So we put it on the agenda, so if we can get somebody to
Chairman.
make a motion to.
Chairman, you cannot vote on that until 10 because it needs to be considered an open session. So my suggestion is that as soon as we come back, we vote on it, you'll sign it, and Carla will arrange to have Mr. Coker come pick it up so he can meet his deadline.
Okay. That's
Thank
our,
you.
that's our boss. No, that's no problem. Ooh. I felt that.
I guess he had taken.
We are ready.
Okay, we ready to get going today? 2 minutes after 10 o'clock, we'll get this meeting going. Welcome, everybody. March the 9th. Can you guys please sit down? Thank you. We had a resolution for the Arts Council grant that was an emergency deal that has to be in today, so we voted at 9 to put it on the agenda, so we are now going to,
You want to do a roll call to make sure Rob is on?
okay, yes, let's do a roll call, please.
Supervisor Frazier,
Here.
Supervisor Rogers, Supervisor Poitras,
Yes.
Supervisor Gonzalez.
Here.
Chairman Wheeler.
Here. And Poitras is at the RCRC meeting, and he is online, so he'll be participating in today's deal. So, is there any reportable action out of the closed session, Council?
Thank you, Chairman Wheeler. We have no reportable actions from closed session.
Thank you. Then we will take the resolution for the Arts Council grant.
I move to approve the resolution designating the Madera County Arts Council.
Second.
Got a second? Any public comment on that? None? Any online? None? Roll call, please.
Supervisor Frazier.
Yes.
Supervisor Rogers.
Yes.
Supervisor Poitras,
Yes.
Supervisor Gonzalez.
Yes.
Chairman Wheeler.
Yes.
Vote passes 5-0.
Okay, item 3. Karen?
Public comment. The first 15 minutes of each regular session are set aside for members of the public to address the board on any matters under the jurisdiction of the board, but not appearing on the agenda. The board will not take any actions on these items presented under public comment. Speakers are limited to 3 minutes. Anyone addressing the board is asked to print their name clearly on the speaker sheet at the podium and state their name and county of residence for the record.
Any public comment? Anybody online? None? Okay, we're going to move right on. Yes, 10 o'clock. Perfect. We're going to move on to 4A. You ready, Stephanie?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, Stephanie Agneson, your Director of Water and Natural Resources, here with a rate study update. I'm ready to share the screen if we could. Thank you. So we're joined by a variety of folks online, including our consultants, Raftellus, the rate consultants, Kevin Kostick, who is going to share doing the presentation with me, as well as Jim Armstrong. We have the county's municipal advisors here from KNN. Bobby Chung is here. Greg Young is here. And then we have project subject matter experts here as well, including John Davids from Davids Engineering to talk through recharge, Jerry Brown, Executive Director of Sites Reservoir, to talk through sites, Pete Leffler to talk through domestic well mitigation, and Duncan McEwen to talk through land repurposing. Today, we anticipate walking through the projects and the costs, joined with our subject matter experts, and then moving on to the rate. So just to give a summary of what we've done, as you know, your board has been involved intimately in preparation of 3 groundwater sustainability plans that include projects and management actions dating back to 17, 18, and 19. The GSPs were adopted in December of 2019 and then submitted in January of 2020. We've done extensive public outreach to develop an allocation as well as key project details to develop costs. We've developed some flexibility with the farm unit concept to manage water as a larger economic unit rather than on an acre by acre basis. And then with your board direction, we have been aggressive about water supply augmentation. And I just want to use this metaphor. It's been used before by water managers, but there are essentially 2 knobs you can turn. There's a water supply augmentation knob and there's a demand reduction knob. So you want to have the ability to turn both knobs and have that flexibility. If we take away the ability to augment water supplies, we're left only with the demand management knob to turn, which is, of course, the most painful one. So what we heard from the board is the board understands the necessity of a fixed rate for years 1 and 2 and prefers a hybrid rate for 3, 4, and 5. The hybrid combines a fixed and a volumetric component. We heard last week that the board wants more project information, so we are back with our subject matter experts. And we heard that the board wanted to talk about options when acres come out of irrigated production. What happens to those acres? What are the options for farmers? So here is the basic structure. We often talk about the county GSA. It's, of course, 3 separate GSAs in the Madera, Chowchilla, and Delta Mendota subbasins. There is an existing GSA fee that pays for administration and planning that has gotten us to this point. What we're here today to consider are the GSP project fees. So I made a short summary based on public comment at the last meeting of some key questions. What is being measured as the basis of the rate? We're talking about enrolled acreage in the farm unit subject to a fixed rate, which is similar to how irrigation districts have a fixed rate on property taxes. The ETAW of the farm unit as a whole is measured as the basis for the volumetric component when we're talking about years 3, 4, and 5. Is the penalty part of the rate? No, it's not. However, people have asked for this information to be presented in tandem, so we are honoring that so that people can see kind of a complete cost picture. If you wanted to appeal the ETAW, you would be appealing a full year's worth of data. So that would start at the beginning of next year. Is the money shared between subbasins? No. This is essentially 3 rate studies. So money for Madera subbasin, county GSA stays in that pot. Same thing with Chowchilla, it stays in the Chowchilla pot. Is the allocation optional? No, it's not optional. There are workshops and outreach that we've done. We've added the meeting last week. And as you know, we had a public workshop on Zoom with 99 people. Due to Zoom settings, that was all we could handle, but you can see there that it's full. So we have this additional opportunity for input. Okay, so we're now to the projects and costs. And Kevin Kostick would need to be unmuted.
I think I'm unmuted, Stephanie.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Good morning, supervisors. Kevin Kostick from Raftellus. This next section, we're going to walk through each project individually. I'm going to provide some context and the detail of the costs as they flow into the rate study in 2 or 3 slides. And then we'll have our consulting team and subject matter experts walk through some finer details and frequently asked questions on each project. So we'll go back and forth between speakers for the next bit here as we walk through the 4 projects. So we're going to start with recharge. Go to the next slide. So our recharge facilities would be either conducted on farm or in dedicated basins. The expectation is that flood flows for recharge facilities would be available on average every approximately 3 years, a 35% chance annually. The recharge projects themselves, the schedule of those facilities are dependent on the design timeline of each individual project in each subbasin, as well as the water rights acquisition timeline. Financing assumptions, so recharge facilities are the one project that we'd be looking at financing with debt. The assumptions as we work through with your municipal advisors, a 5% interest rate, 30-year term, level payments, and a coverage requirement, an expected minimum coverage requirement of 1.5. We wanted to show what you get, what growers get from these recharge facilities as we look out over a 10-year horizon. So the chart on the left is showing the Madera subbasin. The chart on the right is the Chowchilla subbasin. 5 projects in each. The Madera projects, we get out to 2032. We only have 3 projects completed. Projects 4 and 5 are beyond that horizon. In Chowchilla, we've got all 5 projects completed at the end of the decade. And what we're showing are the predicted annual water yield. So if we take that expected capacity and volume of recharge and we annualize that, when we get out to 2030, we're looking at about 16,000 acre-feet per year in the Madera subbasin and about 22,000 acre-feet per year in the Chowchilla subbasin. So what is it going to cost? Top table here is showing our capital costs, and the bottom table is going to show the annual cash needs based on capital costs and the financing assumption. So the top table, first is the Madera subbasin projects 1 through 5, and then Chowchilla 1 through 5, and then walking left to right, the design and construction cost, that's our all-in cost, gross. The next column are grant expectations. So those are firm for project 1, and then we have expected $4 million per project in subsequent projects. And then landowner contributions, we're netting out. Those are in kind for utilizing on-farm recharge. And so the net of those is the cost to the county GSAs for each project in each subbasin. We then translate that again based on the capital costs, the timing, and the financing assumptions to show what the annual cash needs for our recharge projects are in each year. And you see that they build up as we bring facilities online, ramping up from just some early design costs in the first few years. And then once we get toward the end of the decade, we're looking at about $7.3 million to say $8 million in Madera, and in Chowchilla, about $5 million per year for recharge facilities. Next slide. And so I'm going to turn over to John David.
Hey, good morning. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, good. I've had a little bit of internet issues this morning, as luck would have it, so hopefully I can sail through the slides without issue. Good morning, Chairman Wheeler and fellow board members. It's a pleasure to be with you this morning. As Stephanie mentioned, my name is John Davidson with Davidson Engineering, and we've been assisting your staff with recharge project development. As an aside, I spent the majority of my career to date in the public sector, so it does feel a little bit like a homecoming to be back before an elected body today. I have 3 quick slides for you this morning. Before I jump into those slides, however, I want to go back to 2 items that Stephanie mentioned in the opening. The first of which has to do with development of the groundwater sustainability plans in 2018 and 2019, of course, leading up to approval of the GSPs in 2020. If you were to pull up section 4 in both the Chowchilla GSP and the joint GSP in the Madera subbasin, you'd see a host of recharge projects described using both section 215 water from the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation and floodwater off the east side bypass. My point here is that the recharge projects, before you today are the same projects that were generally described in the associated GSPs and have been widely discussed with the stakeholders leading up to and, of course, following GSP adoption. Item has to do with your desire to be aggressive with respect to water supply augmentation. I've been in the field speaking with growers as part of our ongoing design work. And I think it's safe to say that can you guys hear me all right still?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, we can hear you.
So,
Can't hear you now. Said it.
John, we can't hear you right now.
They said he's buffering.
Oh,
all right, am I back?
Yeah.
Yep.
All right, sorry about that. Let me start with, or go to the second item, and I think that's about where I cut out, but desire to be aggressive with respect to water supply augmentation. I've been in the field speaking with growers as part of our ongoing design work, and I think it's safe to say that growers that I've had the privilege to meet and talk to appreciate this approach. I think they're enthusiastic about the recharge projects and are eager to participate. So anyway, with that as a bit of a backdrop, let's jump into the slides that I have for you today. First, what's the goal of recharge facilities? From our perspective, the goal is simple and consistent with the GSPs that were prepared, and that is simply just to divert and recharge flood flows when water is available. With respect to the source, again, there are 2 sources: Section 215 water from the Bureau of Reclamation and flood flows from the Chowchilla bypass. In years where that water is available, we estimate that approximately 190,000 acre feet of recharge could occur in both the Madera subbasin and the Chowchilla subbasin. As Kevin mentioned, of course, that doesn't happen every year, and as you know, but we do predict that flood flows will be available in approximately 1 out of every 3 years. From our perspective, the concept of using flood flows is an important one. So, what we're talking about here is the use of surface water that can't be stored and or put to another beneficial use. And the recharge projects that have been developed to date accomplish 2 things. The projects facilitate groundwater recharge in an area that desperately needs it. And second, the projects take a flood burden off of the existing flood conveyance infrastructure at a time when capacity is limited. So fundamentally, these projects are multi-benefit projects. If we're successful in our recharge efforts, we think we can mitigate and prevent undesirable results associated with the chronic lowering of groundwater levels, depletion in groundwater storage, and land subsidence. Next slide, please. As Stephanie mentioned in the opening, there has been extensive public outreach to date on the recharge projects, and so we thought it'd be helpful to review a host of questions that we frequently get asked and the associated answers to each of those questions. So the first of which is, are designs completed for all projects? The answer to that question is no. Designs aren't completed for all projects. Designs for the first 2 projects, the first project in the Madera subbasin and the first project in the Chowchilla subbasin, are underway now. This work is made possible through 2 $4.6 million grants that your staff worked hard to secure, and I'm certain that what we learned there during the design and construction will provide valuable insight when funding is available and work's initiated on the other projects. Second, and this is an important question, are the water rights currently in place? We gave a similar presentation a week or so ago, and I think at times this question feels a bit like a gotcha question. I think we tried to be transparent about the fact that for many of the projects, acquisition of the water rights is a pending action item. And your staff's continuing to work with the State Water Board and the Bureau of Reclamation to secure the water rights for recharge projects that have been identified. Specific to the State Water Board and projects off the bypass, the State Water Board has provided several water rights options for groundwater recharge projects, both from a temporary and a permanent perspective. And as a real-world example of the temporary water rights option, the county GSA is looking forward to continuing its ongoing collaboration with Triangle T Water District, Clayton Water District, and the underlying landowners as it relates to an existing temporary water rights application for water off the bypass that has historically been approved by the state board. So I think this is a good sign. It's a positive signal, and something that we would look to replicate for other projects. Lastly, I think it's important to, within the context of the water rights discussion, to recall that if water rights aren't in place prior to the start of construction for whatever reason, it's my understanding that you and your staff would have the opportunity for a go, no-go decision at that point, okay? What kind of facilities are being contemplated? For each of the projects, we envision a mix of flood mar, which, as you know, is simply the flooding of existing agricultural land during the winter months for the purposes of groundwater recharge, and then, of course, dedicated recharge basins. Again, the mix and ultimate effectiveness of these options, from my perspective, will be informed through our completion of the first 2 projects. And again, we talked about the fact that those are underway now. And then lastly, I've included a placeholder for other facilities. From my perspective, this is a catch-all bucket for facilities and practices that emerge over the implementation horizon. I think it's safe to say that there may be new technologies and new methodologies that are developed over the course of time. Are any of these projects underway now? Again, as I mentioned, design work is underway for the first 2 projects, one in the Madera subbasin and one in the Chowchilla subbasin. Both of these projects total approximately $4.6 million each and are being funded by existing Prop 68 grants. For both of those projects, we're actually forecasting that 30% design should be completed by the end of this month, so the end of March 2022. And subsequent to that, we would begin work on the 60% design. Next slide, please. So how can folks participate and or learn more about the projects? If you're a landowner within the respective subbasins, conveying your interest is relatively easy. There's a recharge interest form on the Madera County Water Recharge webpage that includes a recharge survey. folks can simply complete that survey and send it back. With respect to staying up to speed and or learning more, interested parties can always reach out to your staff, as you know, and or join the interested party list, which is also on the Madera County Water Recharge webpage. Is participation voluntary? Yes, of course, participation is voluntary. If landowners don't want to participate, they simply don't have to. And then lastly, with respect to the frequently asked questions, how many projects are contemplated? Kevin alluded to this during his introduction and wind up to recharge. Currently, there are 10 recharge projects contemplated, 5 in the Madera subbasin and 5 in the Chowchilla subbasin. Again, this is a phased approach with some of the early work being focused in the Chowchilla subbasin in an effort to mitigate concerns related to subsidence and building off the good work that's been done in the area to previously to define those projects in advance of the water rights permitting. So finally for me today, and in conclusion, I think I'd offer 4 overarching comments. First, there are a lot of project-specific details to be worked out. I think we acknowledge that. Second, the projects are predicated on the use of floodwater. Third, the projects are consistent with your desire to be aggressive about water supply augmentation. And then lastly, it seems likely that you and your staff will have a future go, no-go decision prior to construction. So Chairman Wheeler, that's all I have for you today related to recharge, and I'd be happy to take any questions that you may have.
Real quick, John. So when you say participation voluntary, that means that it's voluntary to like flood the land or dedicate land for a recharge basin, correct?
That's correct. You have it exactly right.
You're not talking about participation in the recharge rate.
No participation in the projects themselves.
Okay.
Yeah, concerning recharge, and I love the big projects, but we need also the thousands of small projects that could be developed, and there are some existing potential in the projects that already exist. Basins that exist could be improved to augment their rechargeability. As an example, we have a number of basins that exist for city disbursement of water off of streets and what have you to keep flooding down to a minimum. Back when I was on the city council, we built a nice nice basin outside the city of Chowchilla that fills up every storm event. And the question should be asked in each of these cases when we look at these basins, small basins, but they have the potential for great benefit. And the question should be asked, are they recharging? Are they percolating? And if not, how can we augment that to happen? Because when water just sits in these basins due to the ground conditions, whatever that may be, you might have a hard rock layer underneath, and we have a lot of that around hard pan that keeps water from perking down to into the aquifer. We need to take care of that situation, penetrate some holes, and do some gravel fill. The CWD has purchased a drilling machine that's capable of doing these kind of things. So I think that we could monitor the progress of even smaller projects and what the benefit of the multiplicity of these projects can be even greater than some of these big projects.
Thank you. And actually, the maintenance costs are included in this. We've found that recharge basins do need a raking and every year and then a deep ripping every couple of years. John, do you want to add anything to that?
Well, I would just add that I think I agree with the comments. I think our job from an engineering perspective is to provide the highest level of recharge at a rate that is locally cost effective. And we will be looking for all opportunities to use existing infrastructure to the extent it exists to provide the desired level of recharge that's available. And I will say that at least from our early field work on the first 2 projects, that opportunity is there, right? I mean, as we get out on the landscape, we understand that, moving a pipeline from point A to point B and working with the underlying landowners, there's a lot of existing infrastructure that can be used to maximize the amount of recharge potential that exists. So I think we're doing that, and I think that potential will continue into the future.
Just one more thing on that, and that is I have a concern about well depth in general, and I think this is related to recharge in a sense because that we've got to get as much water back into the aquifer as possible, and much of that is going to filter into the upper layer above the cork and clay layer when you're talking about top-down circumstances where the cork and clay layer has been compressed and is less penetrable than it was in the past. It was a nice spongy material before. Now it's compacted and become a problem. I have a concern about deep wells and saltwater intrusion from the coast, and I know this is a very real issue that a lot of people have not thought about, and that is the deeper you go, you're pumping, and the water that's migrating from the coast to fill that void. That's what the aquifer consists of. And my question would be, do we have any deep water or deep well monitoring that we can identify saltwater intrusion as a problem?
So that's an interesting question, and in a little bit we have a hydrologist, Pete Leffler, who could talk to that. Are you okay if I flag that for a little bit?
That's great. I just
When it's on his turn.
I'm kind of shotgunning when I think of these things, but that is something that's been on my mind for some time, and I haven't brought it up until this point.
We'll get that.
Yeah.
Supervisor Gonzalez? Supervisor Poitras?
I've got one more.
Another one?
I had questions, but
Okay.
I hadn't rung in, so I yielded my time. So just looking at the numbers, John, like how I've got just a couple or like three questions. So how certain are these $4 million a year, or for each project in these grants? Do we know I know we've been pretty successful to begin with, but $20 million is a lot of money to make up if we don't get these grants. So how certain is that?
Stephanie, do you want to take that, or would you like me to?
I would be glad to try. So I don't think there's any certainty when it comes to grants. I think, and we have a slide on this a little bit later, the state has been generous in terms of grant money with us as we get things rolling, but we do need the rate study to provide most of that funds. So this is based on an estimate of what we thought we would probably get, but it is possible that we end up trying to borrow more money.
Okay. And then just looking at the costs and the design and construction, there's projects 1 through 3 were in the first 10 years, but then 4 and 5 are closer to the end. But the price of them are about the exact same, within like $100,000 spread. Actually, the last project shows the least expensive, which I've never found to be true. But so are they different types of projects and are using and it just happens to look very similar in terms of the price? Or do we have like cost escalators in there to show what the true value will be in 20 years, 15, 20 years?
Yeah, there are cost escalators built in. I will say that the projects are scaled from some of the early estimates that we did during completion of the grant, which the county's operating and we're operating under now in terms of a design perspective. So what we've done is we've taken those unit costs and really just scaled them up or down depending upon the acreage and the number of points of diversion off of the bypass or turnouts off of the existing other irrigation district conveyance infrastructure. But they are scaled. There is a scaling factor for the timing associated with when these projects will be done.
Okay, so the earlier projects are just more in depth and kind of more bang for the buck, and then it just gets more expensive as we go.
Well, I think there's some truth to that. The other thing that is true is that as grant opportunities come up, I think we have the ability to scale the projects down to the monies that are available to a certain extent. So you look at the two $4.6 million projects that we've been done that are underway now. I would say that those are scaled down to meet the grant funding that is available. And even in the second round of grant funding that we just applied for here last week, we did the same there, where we tried to scale it down to meet the funds that are available.
Right, because every project that we're doing now is purely grant funded. It has no other funding from anything else.
That's correct.
Okay, so thank you for those two. And then the last one, so looking at the 190,000 acre feet, and that's kind of what has been available in the past. We do have one contract. It's very small, 200 acre feet for the benefit of MD1. But we've been able to get 215 from that. And so this 190,000 acre feet, what happens as other GSAs and other water districts are now clamoring to get any drop of water they possibly can, and they have more senior rights? Is this a conservative estimate of 190,000, or is this a historical number? Or how? I'm not going to use the word certain again, because the only thing I've learned is that's uncertain is money coming from the state and water coming in. So where did this 190,000 come from, and how likely is it that we'll be able to deliver that?
Well, again, 190,000 acre feet is based off of, the past hydrogeologic, year types and the volume of water that's been available in those year types. So it is true that it is based off of a reflection of the past, which isn't necessarily an indication of what can be expected in the future. But it's, I think the best tool that we can use now to forecast that water availability. It is also true that as groundwater recharge, specifically in this area, becomes a preferred method with respect to achieving sustainability, there will be more parties that are certainly interested in those floodwaters, right? Suffice it to say that I think in those wet and above normal year types, there may be enough water to go around when we're conveying that water out of the area for flood control purposes. So again, this is, I think, a unique opportunity to advance multi-benefit projects and provide a benefit to the flood control infrastructure side of the house as well.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, might I suggest we move to the next project, because
Okay. I got one question, one statement, not a question. It's just on page 7. You got March 1st, 2021. That's actually 2022. Right at the bottom, our Board of Supervisors, the rate studies that we've done.
oh, right, you are. That is my mistake. Sorry.
No problem. I just want to get it correct on this. But we'll
I've got a quickie here.
make it quick.
Yeah, when we talk about the size and number of projects, and of course the cost goes up as we talk about number of projects, and the further in the future, the more costly the projects. But I would also suggest that we consider projects based on suitable soil type and land, because
That's probably number one in the deal.
yeah, that's absolutely.
I'm sure it is.
That is absolutely the preeminent factor on the volume of water you're going to be able to percolate into the basin. And there are places with super opportunity, like there was out there at Triangle T. I know even the land in most of
Well, some of us, we
Chowchilla,
got to make sure it's available too.
Yeah.
So
the
but
land in most of Chowchilla is sandy loam.
Yeah.
So it is highly suitable as long as you can get past that hard pan. If you don't bust past the hard pan, you're not going to perk it
Okay.
hardly at all. But anyway, and then I think it's time too that we, and I know our developers aren't going to want to hear this, but we need to look at our developer requirement of a 1-to-1 and maybe bump it to a 1.25 or a 1.5 to 1. And that would deal with recharge basins.
Okay, I am going to move to the next presenter, which is back to Kevin, and then to Jerry Brown, Executive Director of Sites.
We're doing Duncan now?
Nope, we are on back to Sites Reservoir, and Kevin Kostick is going to
Kevin,
start.
okay.
Okay. So our second project is our second supply augmentation project, Sites Reservoir. Participation of the county GSAs would be at 10,000 acre feet per year of water yield. The site's construction estimates are from roughly year 2024 to 2030, the reservoir filling thereafter, and first delivery is estimated around 2032 or 2030. So what the GSA needs as far as cash needs to participate with sites, there's a buy-in for work done to date. There's annual future debt service as the site's project borrows money and gets into construction. And then once we're into operations, we have future operations costs. The county GSA's cost share of all of that is based on the participation yield relative to the total participation yield. What that translates into is about 6% of total costs. So that'd be 6% of future debt service, 6% of future O&M costs. Next slide. So the sites team internally has modeled several different scenarios, financing scenarios, from what we'll call best case to worst case, kind of rosy to less rosy. We're using the second most conservative scenario in our modeling, and that is in part because it's consistent with our financing assumptions on our recharge facilities. So those align there. When we do that, when we take the 6%, those assumptions, future O&M costs, the estimated annual cash requirement once we get out to operations is just shy of $10 million. And that's a portion between the Madera and Chowchilla subbasins based on the enrolled acreage in each subbasin. So once we get to operations, we're looking at about 6.6 million in the Madera subbasin each year and about 3 million in the Chowchilla subbasin. Next slide. And this will be for Jerry.
Thanks, Kevin. Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the board, staff, and members of the audience. I'm pleased to be here again today to provide you with an update on the Sites Reservoir and answer any questions that you might have as it relates to the matters that you're considering related to your GSA. We met probably, what was it, about 3 or 4 months ago. I came down to the supervisor chambers and we went through an overview of the Sites Reservoir project. So the board members have a pretty good familiarity with it. But for those of you that aren't as familiar, this is an off-stream reservoir that is proposed in the north of Delta area of a small town of Maxwell, California in the Sacramento Valley. The project would, a lot like recharge facilities, take excess water supply that is flowing into the Sacramento River downstream of the Shasta Dam and the Keswick Dam. So it's all rain fed. That flow, excess flow, would be picked up out of the Sacramento River and stored in the Sites Reservoir, the 1.5 million acre foot Sites Reservoir, for use during the drier periods by public water agencies and the state and federal government. And largely what this is a tool to help us restore our flexibility in our water management. But more specifically, I think there's a real diversity of participation in this project. And I would mention specifically that anywhere from about 20% to 40% of the project would be dedicated to environmental purposes. So that's significant. This would be the first time that environmental uses would have a specific asset to utilize in times of need for certain environmental objectives. The remainder would be for water users, and again, primarily for dry year periods. So the next couple slides just give you some of the frequently asked questions that we get about the project. Before I get into the one on this slide and one on the next slide, I just wanted to mention, since I met with you last, we did received the feasibility determination from the Water Commission at the end of last year. So we did fulfill the Prop 1 statutory requirement to have certain conditions met by the end of last year. We're very proud to be able to say that. It shows we have good progress that we've made, and we've got a good tailwind behind us now, and we're making great strides to keep the project rolling on track for the 2030 completion that Kevin mentioned. Last time I met with you all down in the chambers, there was some questions about how the water would get from sites to Madera County. It's a fairly long distance, but it's not uncommon for water to move from the north to the south, as you know, and generally speaking, in these drier years, there is excess capacity to transfer water from the north to the south through the state and federal export pumps. And we would utilize that capacity. It's not really all that surprising. There's just not a lot of water in the system to move. So therefore, the capacity exists for moving any additional water that can be created, which the site's reservoir would do. Once the water gets into south of Delta, then the county would have the ability through the state and federal aqueduct and canal, get the water over in the Delta Mendota pool, and then from there either function through exchanges with other water users in the area or utilize capacity for wheeling within existing conveyance facilities in and around the county. So the folks in San Joaquin Valley are very creative when it comes to moving water around and very supportive, and I have no doubt that the county will be able to move water and make that water available to its users. Next slide, please. The one question I wanted to touch on here is, this whole question of timing and why is it taking so long, and is this actually going to get done? And I think I went over this with you last time, but it really separates the sites project, I think, from a lot of the other surface storage proposals that have occurred. And this goes to the idea of local support. The JPA itself is made up of the local irrigation and water districts in the Sacramento Valley. And since 2010, the project has been in formulation and development. And again, with that decision at the end of last year by the state of the feasibility determination, the prior year's determination by the federal government of feasibility, that really sets us on a solid path for success. A couple of the upcoming milestones that we're planning to hit, we're going to be applying for our water right next month. That will be a very significant activity leading to the completion of the water right within 18 to 24 months. That, along with successfully achieving a couple of critical permits, is what our board has said we need to have in order to proceed into the bank financing phase of the project and the final design and construction, which we anticipate starting in 2024. And again, completing the project and being in operation by 2030. So I'll stop there, and I'm happy to answer any questions or address any concerns that you might have. Thank you.
Okay.
I was just going to capitalize on that thought of moving water. A lot of times it's more paper moving than water moving, and you alluded to that, and I think that's what will happen more times than not. It's not necessarily physical water that's coming down from the top to the south. It's just the exchanges that occur.
Brett?
No.
Letty? Rob?
Nope.
Okay, moving on.
Okay, our third project, domestic well mitigation. Next slide. So this project program was described in the appendices to the Madera and Chowchilla Subbasin GSPs. The estimates you will see and that Pete will discuss are based on their hydrologic modeling. The local estimates for replacing a domestic well is $30,000 per well in 2021 dollars. And the modeling was grouped into kind of 5-year windows, of which in the rate study we take that and say, well, we do an equal number of well replacement effort each year in that 5-year window. The program itself would be cash funded through rates, not eligible for debt financing. Next slide. So we're laying out the total cash needs based on all of those assumptions. So again, the modeling, the expected number of dry wells for replacement in each year looking out to 2032. So that's the top section of this table. In Madera, we're talking about over 100 wells per year in the first few years. That actually increases to about 150 wells per year out to the end of the decade. And then that third 5-year window declining to about 20. In Chowchilla, far fewer, 17 per year. Then we're into single digits and completed with the program at the end of the decade. Taking that cost to replace each well, escalating it by an assumed inflationary factor each year, gives us the total capital costs in each year for the Madera and the Chowchilla subbasins, starting at about $3.2 million per year in Madera. That actually ramps up over time. We're talking about $5 to nearly $6 million per year to the end of the decade. And then in Chowchilla, roughly $500,000 in the first few years, declining to about $250,000. The program management costs were estimated at 10% of capital, with those details to be refined. I think we accidentally skipped ahead a few here.
Sorry, that was me. We can consider it a preview for what comes later.
I have a question on domestic well replacement.
Sure. And we have Pete Leffler, principal hydrogeologist with Ludorf and Scalmanini, to cover a couple more slides, and he has a firm exit at 11. So if we could get him in,
Yeah,
that
let's
would be
do that.
wonderful.
That's fine. Yeah.
Take it away, Pete.
Okay, thank you, Stephanie. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, great. Good morning, supervisors. Good to be here. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the domestic well mitigation program. What is it? And some frequently asked questions. So first of all, what is it? You know, the GSPs recognize the likely significant unreasonable impacts to domestic well beneficial users during the implementation period of the GSP from 2020 to 2040, you know, before we get to sustainability. So in order to avoid those significant unreasonable impacts on domestic well users, the GSPs included discussion about development of a domestic well mitigation program. And so this proposed program would assist domestic well users in obtaining a water supply when their wells go dry during the implementation period due to continuing declines in groundwater levels. And, you know, based on initial review of the GSP and then our consultations with DWR, you know, it's clear that it will be necessary to either avoid adverse domestic well impacts altogether or implement a program such as this to mitigate for these impacts. So next slide. So some of the frequently asked questions about it is, you know, how did we estimate the numbers of dry wells that we're predicting to occur? So we are in the process of completing, well, we've essentially completed, and we're developing the, you know, the documentation for it. But the estimated numbers, locations, and depths of the domestic wells are based on a study we've been doing, funded by a DWR Prop 68 grant, where we compared, you know, projected future groundwater levels with, you know, the well depths that we understand from domestic well inventory using hydrologic modeling. And then the second question is, well, you know, why are we paying mitigating for dry domestic wells here? So basically, this program balances the economic benefits and consequences across all groundwater beneficial users in the basin of continued groundwater overdraft prior to achieving sustainability by 2040. Now, obviously, we expect to gradually close the gap on that overdraft as we get towards 2040. But there's going to be a time period here where that's going to continue to occur. So third is where can we find out more about the inventory? We have some technical memoranda that we're being prepared and will be made available, hopefully in the next coming couple months. So next slide. How is the program being funded? So the county GSA portion of the funding is through this rate study. And then funding from other GSAs is being discussed. Next is how can I participate to be eligible for assistance under the program? So we're currently having meetings to discuss the details such as that will be how the program will work. So the information on that will be forthcoming. Lastly is what kind of assistance is included. And again, the details of that are still under development. However, it's anticipated that the assistance would focus on well replacement or possibly some alternative solutions for wells that go dry as a result of lowered groundwater levels during the implementation period. And wells that stop producing due to other problems, such as a pump problem or a well structure failure from like being an old well, that are unrelated to lowering of groundwater levels, will not be included.
What about
And so that's the information that we have for you today on domestic well mitigation. So I'm happy to answer any questions on that, and I can also address the previous question that came up on seawater intrusion.
Yeah. Supervisor Rogers has got a question.
I'll let you answer that question on saltwater intrusion first, then I have two other questions for you.
Okay, great. So in our development of the GSP, and it's discussed in the GSP, these aquifers are not connected to the coast, so there won't be seawater intrusion in the basin. There's of course the shallow aquifers above the Corcoran clay and the deeper aquifers below it, but they're not connected to the coast, so seawater intrusion is something that will not occur. There is some mention, and I think in one of the comments on the GSP, about higher salinity water, not necessarily related to seawater intrusion, but in the Delta Mendota subbasin,
right.
It's not that close necessarily to Madera Chowchilla subbasins, that some concern was expressed related to that. But again, we don't see that as problematic. And the whole purpose of what we're doing here is to reverse the water level trends. And so, everything we're doing is going to go towards, even if there were such a concern, that would be mitigated.
I'm glad to hear that about the saltwater intrusion, because that is a question that's been floated at me dozens of times, and I just never got to bring it up.
Yeah. What, you got another question?
Yeah, I have two
Okay.
more. You answered one of them about the data-based water decline, that is, you're using that to determine the number of wells that are going to go dry. What do the models show as the groundwater levels as we approach 2030 and 2040? Can you give me an approximation based on those models?
Well, the actual elevations will vary substantially across the basin, and it really depends on it depends on geographic or spatial location, as well as the depth that we're talking about within, whether it's an upper aquifer or lower aquifer. And there's a lot of information in the GSP about that. But in a very general sense, what we see is that, continued groundwater level declines, through a period probably roughly between, say, 2030 and 2035, at which time we would bottom out. And then due to implementation of these recharge projects and demand management, that would begin to turn around, ahead of the 2040 deadline, and we would, the groundwater levels would kind of flatten out, and then ultimately you'd see a little bit of rebound. So that's the sort of the general pattern we see. I will say that exactly how we get there is highly dependent on climatic and hydrologic conditions in the early part of the implementation period here. And, of course, unfortunately, we're seeing, relatively dry conditions to start. So, our modeling shows that, the sequence of wet and dry years as we move forward, which we obviously can't predict, with, much accuracy, is going to affect how those trends occur. But I expect in a very general sense, that's kind of what we'll see in the groundwater level patterns.
Given our circumstances the last few years, like 2016, we had a wet year, so we had less probably groundwater decline the next year. But there have been years where it's been accelerated. Do you see that accelerated rate declining or continuing for a space? I know that's based on
Who's going to
conditions and what have you, but based on the modeling and based on we had to have some kind of modeling determination of what would happen there. What do you see in the modeling?
Yeah, so in some of the previous presentations that we've given on this topic, on the numbers of wells and how we've estimated them and what will be coming up in the documentation, because of what has happened with the dry years initially, we've actually used two different climatic sequences in our analysis. So in the GSP, or during development of the GSP, we actually considered three different
ones on the back first. Sure.
Climate scenarios. One where we started out wetter, one where we started out more average, and one where we started out dry. And through the 20-year period, they all had, the average rainfall was about the same, and the hydrologic conditions were about the same. It was just when did the wet or dry years occur. And so what we presented in the GSP was more of an average, where we didn't have extreme, cluster of wet years at the beginning or an extreme cluster of dry years at the beginning of the implementation period. However, what we've used in this most current study is both sort of the average situation and a dry start condition. And the estimates that are kind of, in this rate study are more based on a dry start condition, because that's what we've seen in at least the first couple years of the implementation period. So
it was conservative then.
We've looked at some different kind of bookended it, if you will, a little bit.
Yeah. Thank you. That helps me. Thank you.
Okay, moving on to the next one. Who's taking this?
Kevin, it's your turn starting with land repurposing.
Yeah, I forgot about the mute button, so I think I presented most of this. Sorry about that. So our final project, SALK, our land repurposing, the program would achieve approximately 50% of the total demand management that's required in each of the subbasins over the 20-year window. SALK is a voluntary program to reduce demand from participating irrigated lands. The initial incentive payment per acre, per enrolled acre, would be on the order of $600 to $760 per acre. That's dependent on subbasin, and those incentive payments change over time. It's an annual term for participation. So again, it's not only is it voluntary, but it's not a multi-year enrollment. It's a simple annual term. For rate study and revenue generation purposes, the program is cash funded from rates. Again, we can't finance this project. And then for the staffing costs for managing and administering this program are split between the three subbasins based on the enrolled acreage in each of the three. So our total costs that flow into the rate model and ultimately to the rates, top section are operating costs, as we're calling them in the table. So again, that's staff and administration of the program. Then we have the actual incentive payment costs in the middle section. So the Madera subbasin, starting out at about $4.4 million, ramping up over time. Chowchilla Subbasin starting at about $1.1 million and ramping up over time. And then the bottom section shows you the estimated enrollment on an acreage basis in each year for each subbasin. So starting out at about 6,700 acres in Madera and ramping up the end of the 10-year look to about 20,000 acres enrolled in the program. And then in Chowchilla, starting shy of 2,000 acres and ramping up to about 6,000 acres at the end of the 10-year term. In Delta Mendota, much smaller. In absolute terms, 150 acres going up to about 600 acres. So those are our total cash needs that flow into the program. And I'll turn it to Duncan McEwen at ERA.
Good morning. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Great. Good morning, Chairman Wheeler, members of the board. Duncan McEwen with ERA Economics. We've been supporting the county and stakeholders with going back to GSP development and now GSP implementation. One of the programs we've been working on is the land repurposing program, which is a component of the overall demand management that is planned as part of the GSPs. So Stephanie mentioned, the goal in the GSP is to get, as much water as is feasible and cost effective through recharge and other supply options. Deficit would be made up through demand management. And this land repurposing program is one way to achieve that demand management. It would be implemented in the 3 subbasins, and the goal of the program is to achieve approximately 50% of the total demand management target for each of those subbasins. It would be phased in over time, so starting now and then achieving that 50% level by 2040. Part of the reason for that is to keep costs manageable. The other part of the reason is to allow things to adjust gradually over time, consistent with the overall GSP implementation plan. The fundamental way the program works, it would be to provide incentive payments for landowners or growers to enroll in the program, forego irrigation on previously irrigated lands and repurpose those lands to other uses. It would be a voluntary program, and again, the incentive payment is what would encourage enrollment in that program. It's structured currently as annual enrollment, and this is based on stakeholder feedback that we've received over the last year and a half that we've been working on this program. But it could be adjusted to include, kind of medium-term, 3 to 5 year, or even permanent enrollment options. The way the program achieves demand management is that lands that were previously irrigated forego irrigation. That frees up the allocation on those lands, which is sustainable yield plus transitional water. Next slide, please. So we put together a series of common, frequently asked questions that come up with the program. The first is, normally the first one to come up is, what are the incentive payments for the program? So as Kevin mentioned, those are initially between $600 and $700 per acre per year for an annual enrollment. Those change over time. There's a number of things that drive those incentive payments. The 2 big things that are changing over time are, number one, the scale of the program. So as the program scales up, that means increasingly more profitable, increasingly higher value lands would need to be incentivized to participate. So that would push program payments up. But balanced against that, the transitional water is being ramped down over the implementation period, which would lower those payments. So the incentive payments over time consider both of those factors. Another question that we get is why, stay on the previous slide actually, is why are the initial incentive payments less than my current net returns? So the program is set up to, get some of the more marginal lands or the lower net return lands in the county. So often when we get that question, the program is not targeted to incentivize high value lands to stay in, to come out of production. Those would be lands that you'd expect to stay in production. And it's important because this keeps program costs low. Will lands that are entered into the SALT program be required to pay other GSAPs? The answer to that is yes. this is a fairness consideration. The program incentive payments are set without considering what those other costs are. If those lands did not have to pay those costs, it would just push them onto other lands that are continuing to farm, just increasing costs for those landowners and growers. Next slide, please. What's the anticipated scale of the SALT program? As I mentioned, it would be phased in over the GSP implementation period. The total target is about 50% of the demand management target, which is about 45,000 acre feet per year in Madera, 13,500 acre feet per year in Chowchilla, and 1,000 acre feet in Delta Mendota. Program participation is voluntary. And then how can you participate? So the study that we've been working on is to lay out the parameters and options for the program. Details will be worked out, as funds are secured. And as I mentioned earlier, the initial enrollment would be annual with fixed incentive payments that we just described. So with that, let me stop, and I'm happy to take any questions and other comments.
In terms of land, we're looking at on the 13.5 acre feet year, we're looking at between 4,000 and 5,000 acres on something like that, and then probably the same on, or is it based? We're not basing it on a crop. We're basing it on sustainable yield and TW, right?
That's right. So the program does not target a specific crop or even a specific area.
Okay,
it would just offer an incentive payment, and then
we're looking at much more land than I suggested. Then we're looking at a lot more land than I suggested.
That's correct.
Yeah. Thank you.
So, just to understand, so when it's enrolled in this, it has no access to the sustainable or transitional?
That's right.
So if it's in a farm unit, it was taken out, those waters can't be used on the other farming.
That's correct.
Okay. And then do I understand that you don't have to, like, once you go into this, you don't have to stay in it, you can come out?
Duncan has modeled these as 1-year easements, which is what growers preferred in public workshops.
So if someone's dry farming, they can farm the year that they're resting the land, they can go into SALC, and then come back out the next year.
Yes, a rule like dry farming hasn't been put in the program because we don't have the rules yet, but that if they are not applying any water, that seems like that could presumably go into SALC. Duncan, do you want to add anything to that?
No, I think you covered it. It's just we haven't specifically set up that type of program guideline. It's something we could consider, and then we would look at the water use for the dry land farm crop and think about that as well.
So in a year that someone is taking out a crop and they're not watering it that year, they can go into SALC for that year and get paid, and then meanwhile develop it for the next year, put water on it, and go.
That's right. So if they're resting land at the end of the productive life of their crop, they could put it into SALC for a year or two and then presumably replant a smaller amount of acreage because, of course, everything is decreasing over time in terms of the allocation.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Okay. Bob? Mr. Potris?
No comments. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm still grappling with the amount of acreage that would be removed under SALC, and I'm just looking out to the end of the project. You said 50% of demand reduction, and so in terms of the 45, I'm looking at the 45,000 acre foot per year. So that would be 90,000 acres if you're just basing it on a sustainable yield.
In the table I'm showing right now, you can see the estimated participating acreage through 2032.
Okay,
So a total of 26,300 acres.
okay.
So it
okay.
is a
It's right there in the bottom.
sizable
But
amount
not as big
of
as I was
land
thinking.
that is coming out of
So,
production.
yeah, I just got what the equation is. So it's 50% of demand reduction, not the entire demand.
But and not
Yes.
not everything that's going to be taken out or retired is going to enroll into SALC, because some of it they'll need for their farm unit.
Yes, that's right.
Okay, next page.
Just hit me.
I have a couple slides here. Your board wanted to get some estimates on administration and legal costs from last week. So we have the Madera Subbasin at about 7% administration. That's including staffing, 10% legal. I think that's of the total project costs. Chowchilla, 14% administration, legal costs at 4%, and then the Delta Mendota much smaller. So relatively small administration costs compared to overall costs of the projects.
Why, real quick on that, why is it 14 Chowchilla and 7 Madera? Is it because there's more properties in Madera that got income coming in?
It is because recharge has been accelerated in the Chowchilla Subbasin due to the work of Triangle T and Clayton. So that is in much higher gear right now than in the Madera Subbasin and needs more staff.
Behoove us all to get in gear on that one.
It
Yeah.
would. So let's talk through a couple of options for farmers in the county GSA, which Supervisor Frazier was alluding to. The GSP implementation plan maximizes flexibility for growers. The farm unit management allows growers to allocate their water to parcels and acres within the farm unit as they see fit. There's a potential volumetric rate component. So as land is coming out, it is not paying the volumetric rate. And then there's the potential voluntary incentive payment for growers for land repurposing, which we just talked about. So second bullet, growers receive a water allocation for enrolled acres in the farm unit, which is the total. The rates need to be charged by enrolled acres because the allocation is based on enrolled acres. Growers may decide to have fewer irrigated acres by allocating their water allocation to specific parcels within the farm unit. So then what happens when land comes out of production? So if you had 100 acres and stopped irrigating 20, you could still have access to that allocation for the 100 acres. In effect, you would increase your allocation on the 80 acres, and that would enable you to stay within your allocation and avoid penalties. You'd also avoid paying the volumetric component in years 3, 4, and 5 on those 20 acres and avoid costs of farming those acres. So another option, if you had 100 acres, you could put 20 acres in SALC, and then you would have a SALC payment to you. You would only have access, though, to the allocation on the 80 acres, not the 100. So it essentially avoids what people call double dipping. So in effect, you have the same allocation on the remaining 80 acres. You would avoid those volumetric charges on the 20 acres and reduce your total bill because you'd be receiving a payment for the 20 acres. So then we look at rates as a whole, and Kevin is going to walk us through that part.
Next slide. So we're showing a 5-year rate schedule based on the fixed and volumetric project base, as we called it last time. So this is the structure that would maximize the amount of cost going into the volumetric bucket. So here's the 5-year schedule for the Madera Subbasin. Again, years 1 and 2 fixed only, starting at $180 per enrolled acre to $196 in the second year. And then we introduce the volumetric component. So the fixed portion comes down per enrolled acre. The volumetric comes on $132 fixed and $97 per acre foot in that third year. And then as costs ramp up, so too do the rates for both fixed and volumetric. Next schedule is in the Chowchilla Subbasin, same story. The years 1 and 2 starting about the same in the Madera Subbasin, 189 in year 1, 193 in year 2, and then introducing the volumetric again in year 3. The fixed coming down to $77 per enrolled acre and the volumetric at $91 per acre foot. And then in Delta Mendota, since it's a project-based and we only have SALC in Delta Mendota as a project, we don't have the other 3 project components. That starts as a fixed rate, it continues as a fixed rate, $92 in the first year, $104 in year 2, and so on, up to $200 in year 5 per enrolled acre.
So then we were asked to come back with some costs for the irrigation and water districts locally so that you could see what other people were paying. This is highly simplified, of course, but I think the key is that existing irrigation and water districts are already paying these sorts of fees, both in a per acre and per acre foot way. And because we've promised to keep penalties as part of the discussion, I will mention this: the charges for a farm unit exceeding the annual allocation are called penalties. This is a separate board decision. There are currently 2 potential pieces to that. One is the maximum according to Sigma, which is $500 per acre foot over the allocation. The other piece is this replacement water charge, which is estimated at $600 to $650 per acre foot. So I know eventually we will all have the opportunity to vote on this, so we wanted to be clear on what a no vote meant. So if it's voting no, that means we're not participating in Sites Reservoir. That means we're not getting that 10,000 acre feet of water. That means that there is no water for recharge over and above what grants are currently paying for. You'll see further down on the list, I have grant funds with a question mark. The state has been generous with grants so far. However, if this were voted down, I would not anticipate the state continuing to be generous with grants. A no vote also means no help with domestic wells and no funds for repurposing land. We also have a potential loss of local control if we are not complying with the GSP. And of course, there's the ability to revisit the allocations, because without this extra water that is coming in, the allocation could decline at a faster rate. So that concludes the slides that we have prepared. We would be glad to take your questions. I think Jerry Brown and Pete Loeffler have another meeting that they're attending, but John Davids for recharge and Duncan McEwen for land repurposing, I think, are still on.
Because Sigma allows for the penalties immediately without a 218, correct?
Yes, the $500 could be adopted by ordinance of your board.
So looking at the water districts, that's pretty good comparison. I mean, you know, when you look at, even though it's a simplified view, you've got 160 approximately dollars being charged by them for the same thing we're doing basically, and the farmers that are operating under that have sustained themselves all these years, and that's my concern, is sustainability. So I believe that we're in the realm of sustainability, even though it's not what we particularly like, because it's becoming more and more onerous. You know, with the price of fuel and everything going up, everything's going to impact business and your ability to continue to do business. But our attempt is to not kill the baby we're trying to clothe. So we're charging these fees to clothe the baby. We don't want to kill the baby. That's just my analogy there. But I think we're in that realm.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, great presentation. Thank you, everybody. Over this last week, I've had a chance to really consider, the allocations and the cost, for the allocations, et cetera, et cetera. And, it just kind of hit me that, we want this thing, if we want this thing to pass, we need to present it in a way that a grower understands it. And so that means in a way that I understand it and I can relate to it. So so what I did is I worked on a scenario and a little metric worksheet, and I sent it to Stephanie and to Jay and Matt as well. And so the first principle of the scenarios I put together, they were the glide paths in terms of the reduction of water use also corresponded with the reduction in the rates we were paying. It never made sense to me that we would reduce the use of water, thereby reducing the economic capability of the farming unit, and then increase water costs. Why we were doing that, I have no idea. Maybe anyway, again, I should have probably brought up something earlier, but that kind of bothered me. So I worked out a scenario where actually it would be a fixed rate over the next 5 years, and it would glide down as the rates would glide down as the water use was gliding down. Second of all, I backed in some numbers, and I know according to Stephanie, this isn't something for the cost of projects that would work, but growers relate to acre feet. They don't relate to the cost per acre. It just is not in the thought process at all. So I looked at 28 inches, which is this year's allocation. Put that into acre feet, that's 2.33 acre feet. You multiply that by $110 an acre foot that MID a couple of years ago you would pay for your ditch water, and that came up to roughly $257. So if we're going to go on a per acre, we could show the grower that, okay, we've got a fixed rate at $257 this year, but it's based on a cost of $110 an acre foot. And that's something that people can relate to. And then as the ability, as the drawdown next year, I think it's 27.7, then 27.4, 27.1, et cetera, then the cost per acre, the fixed rate, goes down along with that. Now, second of all, we've had people say, well, I'm much more efficient. I don't need that much water. I shouldn't have to pay, per acre if I'm not using all that water. Well, something that we have not done a good job of advertising and relaying is that there's carryover provisions. You can, if you don't use all your allocation, you can carry it over to the next year. So, and the year after that, which is really, really good because you're going to need that water down the road regardless. So you might be paying for it today, but you still have the use of it down the road. And again, I think that's a huge component of this thing. Again, we could go with a fixed rate because the volumetric is figured into that approach. And again, just kind of going back, I think it's important to show it the acre foot. So if you look at the first 5 years, we're actually raising more money under this scenario than we would be doing under the one that's proposed. And I think that if you explain all these things in grower terms, we can show the grower how it benefits them. Otherwise, I think sometimes we get caught up in these numbers, but we forget about who's actually going to pass this thing, who's going to vote on this thing. So we need to speak in grower terms, not, again, consultant terms. No disrespect to consultants, but again, who's voting on this thing. So those are my comments. That's the approach I'd like to see us move forward on. Thank you.
Thank you, Rob. Stephanie or our consultants? Can you guys address that?
Sure.
Idea?
So I did take a look at what Supervisor Poitras put together. I think there's a couple key takeaways. If your board would like to adopt and would like the rate study to include a fixed rate for all 5 years, that is very doable and is in fact preferred by staff because it's administratively simpler. The fixed rate would mean that you could carry over your whatever you didn't use of your allocation from year to year, and your resolution from August of last year already has provisions for that. I know I've taken a lot of calls in the past 24 hours. Carryover already exists. It's in the resolution. You have the ability to bring it over from year to year. And in fact, it does not make sense to leave it behind. You would want to bring it over. There's also the ability, and we talked about this a couple meetings ago, to sort of level the rates. So that would mean they would start a little bit higher and then they would end a little bit lower than they should be. But that would at least give a fixed rate that is the same number over a 5-year period. Now, that's not decreasing over time, but I think it's at least gives you some certainty in terms of what the rate's going to be. And I think it gets at some of what Supervisor Poitras was illustrating with his own rate study.
Any comments?
Yeah, Rob, what you said makes perfect sense to me. And the equation is that as you decrease the water, profit decreases as well. And at some point, there's going to be a crossover between what you're paying and what you're getting. And then you're going to hit decline. So the equations makes perfect sense. So you're suggesting instead of going with the hybrid rate to go with a fixed rate that might slightly decline over time?
Right, and we're talking about, I think in our rates, we're really talking about 5 years anyway.
Right.
So
right.
In 5 years, we can reconsider this, and I think the selling point is that we can show the grower you're paying roughly $110 an acre foot, and I think if growers said, oh, okay, well, gosh, compared to what a lot of people are paying, that's really a bargain, So,
Yeah,
I mean,
right.
it's not a bargain in terms of, for historical reasons, they've never had to pay a dime for it other than PG&E costs. But in this world, $110 an acre foot is cheap. So I think you show that, you show that we're scaling down. In 5 years, we can reassess, but it's it's something that I would sure, vote for.
Well, your opinion matters a lot to me because you're in the real world of what's going on with water every day. I mean, you live it. So as far as the use and farming and how that equates, a non-farmer can't identify with that at all, really. So your opinion carries a lot of weight with me on that. Thank you.
Thank you.
CEO Varney?
Thank you, Chairman. I just had a housekeeping request for Stephanie. The one page, your page 36 was not in our packet. Could you send me the electronic version? I'll distribute it to the board so they have it. And that was a particularly important page, I think, for them to have so that they can internalize the math on this whole thing, because it was the example page. Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, it took us a long time to get back to original staff's recommendation.
I'm not going to remind you of that.
Go ahead.
I guess just looking at what Rob said, the implementation of this is this huge change. I think there is a byproduct of this that can bring some level of certainty to what the costs are going to be to start plugging in and planning, at least in the next 5 years. Versus I got to look at what it is that mine's saying it needs to be and how much is this volumetric going to do, and it throws in a whole another variable that of uncertainty that could be problematic. So, Rob, why didn't you come up with this earlier?
Yeah.
It's just who knows? I
I will say that our this was the original staff recommendation as well as the consultants in terms of not exactly how you have it, but in terms of the flat. So I don't want to downplay all the work that's gone in from staff as well.
Right. Well, and I think that what, Greg Young mentioned in our, we had that ad hoc meeting last week, and he mentioned that, we're way out in front of this thing, and we're going to have some, there's going to be a lot of nuances and things we need to work through. I think what my thing was, it was more of it's more following the reduction in the use of water. The other one was more of an increase. Which again, people don't relate to that. And I think in this scenario, we're actually on a present value situation, we're raising more money up front than what the consultants proposed.
Okay, just one question, Stephanie. What happens if these projects don't happen, any of them? Is that a feasible deal, or is that going to happen?
So you're saying the rate study is successful, but the projects, for whatever reason, isn't successful. So the money could still be collected. It would still be in the pot tied to the subbasin, and your board can make a decision about what could happen to that money. It could be refunded to growers. It could be used for domestic well mitigation or land repurposing. Those are the projects that could be accelerated.
But we could also move a project too, right?
That's a bad
We could say the site just wasn't good or whatever, and then.
All of those are individual board things that would come back to you.
Okay, well, I just, as chairman, why don't we postpone making any kind of decision for this today and
ruminate on it.
Give all that information that Rob gave to our consultants and you, Stephanie, and run that by everybody and have another special meeting in a couple of weeks on a Wednesday like this. It's a lot better to I don't want to try to rush it in a regular meeting.
Right.
And see and compare it with what we've got already from our consultants.
Yeah.
Stephanie?
So a quick couple of comments. So the reasons our costs go up is because the costs literally go up in recharge every year, and they're going up in land repurposing. So that's why the rates have that incline.
Yeah. Well, all costs are going to go up no matter what.
We can average them over 5 years. That is doable. I don't think we can get them to decrease, but we can get a fixed rate per enrolled acre that is the same over a 5-year period. Some of the feedback from growers has been that they're not in favor of this. Some people are in favor of it. So I think mixed feedback on that, but I just wanted to put that out there. Right. And of course, we have to tie everything to our costs, not MID's costs or Chowchilla Water District's. We were just using that for informational purposes.
Right.
This is small right here, but the water delivery goes down. Profit can go down even more based on the price of almonds. Profit is flexible, but I would say it's more likely to go on a steeper decline than a gradual decline. The cost of delivery going up, which is our cost that we're including in groundwater recharge and what have you. So at some point, the intersect is inevitable. And when that happens, you're out of business. So that's exactly what Rob is saying in a mathematical graph.
Absolutely, and I agree with that.
We've got to reach the point of equilibrium somewhere where you can float along in a parallel graph with profit, sustainable, and groundwater sustainable, and all of those things. How are you going to do that? This is what we have to achieve, is an equilibrium. We have to bring that.
That's the reason I'm suggesting that
those
we
lines
do
to a
that.
parallel. Yeah, we need a little more thought.
Yeah. Brett?
I've said all.
Hear from the public.
Okay. Okay. We ready, Steph? Okay,
I'm ready. I'll sit down.
Okay. We'll open up to the public now and see what our fellow farmers have to say. And if you could sign in over here, we'd appreciate it.
you'd like, I just sign in when I'm done. So
Yeah, absolutely.
I can save time. My name's Mark Peters. I'm a grower in the Madera Subbasin, and thank you for listening. So I would like to ask the board, when you make a rate decision, to not also make that decision without making a penalty decision. I think if you were to ask most growers, maybe all growers, the dollars that will come from the penalties are significantly greater than the dollars that will come from the rate. And let me just use my calculation to give you an example. If there's 85,000 irrigated acres in the Madera Subbasin, and we have an allocation of 28 inches, but everybody uses averagely just 34 inches, they use more than that, that's 6 inches, that's $42 million a year in penalties from the Madera Subbasin. I can say it again if you need, but I'll just keep going. Where the rate dollars at $200 an acre are only about $16 million. And so then you might ask, well, how are we going to estimate the penalty? Well, through IRRAWatch, we have the 2021 ETAW across each of the subbasins, and we can go look at that ETAW and average it across the basin. I would venture to say it will be well above 40 inches, a foot above the 28-inch allocation. And then for 2022, you could probably put in we're being conservative, we're trying to save water and take it down by 10%. The collection of penalty dollars is going to be well above $40 million a year. And so I need you to consider that before you make a rate decision. My second comment, because I want to watch my time, is I want to talk about the Sites Reservoir. When you make a decision on all these projects, and I have comments on all the projects, but Sites is the one that I want you to be more careful on than others. According to the presentation, I believe Sites cost $38 million to get ready for Sites up until the year 2032. And then an additional $9.6 million a year for 10,000 acre feet of water. And I would love staff to clarify if I'm misstating the numbers. That's $960 per acre foot, beginning in about 10 years, after a $38 million upfront cost. That doesn't pay out in anybody's book anywhere, and it's an uncertain proposition with water a long ways away. And so I would just ask that you as you think about it, don't think about the whole project, but the individual projects within it. I know my time's up. I appreciate the chance to have a comment.
Thank you. Who's next? Norm.
This is Igal Trebach. I have a comment.
Yes, I'll get online afterwards. Right now we're doing the public comment from the public here.
Okay.
Good morning still. Norman Allender. Just had a couple of comments, and my comments, forgive me real quick, are based on what I heard today, right, coming into this. So something Supervisor Poitras said about the county being out in front of these issues. I sort of would like to know where the surrounding counties or the counties who have the same deadline as Madera County, where they are on the issue, right? I'm pretty sure I know what's going on in Merced County, but other counties, because I would say being out in front of this is one of the reasons why you have a fair amount of pushback, right? And so I'd sort of like to know that, of where they are on all those things. And basically, have they done allocations? Are they doing fees? So other counties, I'd like to get a better understanding of that. I also, it's just litigation, right? We all knew from the beginning, as soon as this goes into place, right, the lawyers start litigating when it's right for that. Another great point Supervisor Poitras made about the 218 and the rollout. You're going to ask people to vote on this ultimately, right? And the issue to me is that it needs to be put out there in the right way. And something that just came up today about the SALC program, about some questions, and the comment was no rules have been developed, right? So asking someone to vote about a program, to fund a program without some of the details worked out, I would suggest you have that available at the time that the 218 election happens, right? Because it's very likely to have an impact on that, right? So my last point is currently have 2 lawsuits over the allocation program, right? And you want to proceed with implementing the rate study based on the rates based on the allocation program, but you could be compounding the issue, right? By proceeding with this, being, again, out in front of it, right? Because you already have litigation, and can you rely upon that? You guys know, I'm sure your attorneys have pointed that out to you. You're relying upon a program that's being challenged. So I would say, I would agree, Madera County is out front. I'm probably a little more interested in being in the middle of the pack. I don't suggest you be last. I don't suggest you bury your head in the sand. I can see the wheels turning. I'm not suggesting that at all. But I'm suggesting that by being out front, you invite yourself controversy. So anyway,
Shot at easier.
And I speak from experience, by the way. So thank you very much. I'll sign in.
Okay. Good morning, I guess it still is.
Good morning. My name is Michelle Lascoity, and I'll sign in as well afterwards. Just my comments for you all today as well is to consider the magnitude of what you are exacting upon the growers in your neighborhood. And I have to say that this is not likened to a surface water delivery program. So our our white area irrigated lands, yes, we are pumping, and we pay the costs associated with that pumping, whether right or wrong. Those range from anywhere from $160 an acre foot to $200 an acre foot, because, by the way, the vendor PG&E wants to be paid every month as well. So you are actually levying on top of that cost the I'll just use $184. That was the last presentation. It's similar to that today, which will then increase our acre and the $28 fee or such that goes along with Sigma. Another roughly $200 on top of our cost of water. So it is not likened to MID. I also have MID irrigated lands and understand the cost of the water delivered there. But in that case, the water is delivered, we pay for it, and we're not pumping it out of the ground with our large pumps. So it's not an apples to apples comparison. Secondly, I'd like to say the same as Norm, that was just coincidental, that being on the cutting edge of these issues carries great burden and great impact for the future. So I would hope that you all are very conscious of what you might be doing with your decisions to the economic well-being of your county and the rural environment in which we live. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Come on up, Clay.
Good morning. Clay Dalton, non-irrigating rancher. But I was on the advisory committee. Committees going back 2008, I noted, for all its years. As I understood it, well, in Chowchilla, the Chowchilla area was met with equity issues about being closer or farther from percolation basins. Now we have a proposal for percolation. It's going to be quite expensive. Now, sustainable yield has been going on, I think, since the beginning of time. It was called, for a while, it was called native water, I think. So that was fixed at half foot, let's say, whatever it turns out to be, whatever it is today. Now you're going to have a whole bunch of new percolated water that, as I understand it, is going to be sustainable yield also. Is that correct? It's not?
We got to, they ask a question and we get up there. It's got to be on line, so she's got to answer up there, not down there.
Okay, okay.
That's okay?
Want her to answer here?
No, why don't you go ahead and ask your questions and then
Okay,
we write these down and then we
So-
will answer them all.
that will not be sustainable yield, but that's the question. So I'd like the answer to it.
Okay. Anybody else? Okay, then we got somebody online,
Yeah, Igal Trebosh is on.
okay? You go?
Thank you very Yeah, this is Igal Trebash. Can I speak now?
Yes, if you can speak up a little louder, it'd help, buddy.
Sure, no problem. In the beginning of Supervisor Roger brought up a point in regards to collection basins, small collection basins. I just wanted to point out that through the RWMG, we have a potential project that could bring up to 200 recharge wells that can be installed in small basins in order to create faster recharge. It means that those wells will go down 75 feet through some of the hard pin lenses and will be able to take a lot more water faster based on a study that Professor Pritchard has done. Aside from that, I have a question. If there's going to be some private investment in recharge basins, is there a way to get water credits for money invested in these projects?
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Stuart? Can you hear me, Stuart?
Oh, I can hear you, yes.
Can you give
I
us
got
your name and stuff, it'll help so we can have it.
Yeah, Stuart Weil,
Thank you.
and I'm a small grower, grow citrus, and I've got two comments. One is for the life of me, I don't understand the 80% rule. You take 20% of your farmland out and you get the regular allocation, but if you take 25% of your ag land out, you get docked by 1.42 acre feet. So I'm not sure I understand why you're doing that, and I'll give you why I'm asking. I have about a total of 75 acres. I have 25 acres which are out of production, leaving me about 50 acres in production. But I lose that full allocation. And I just don't understand why you're doing that. You would think that you want to get people to take more land out of production by giving them an incentive to get the full allocation. But if you take out any more than 20%, you lose that full allocation. So that's one thing. Second, I have a problem with people voting on this because we're only being represented by about 50% of all irrigated lands in Madera County. The other 50% is governed by different water districts. And we have no idea what those water districts are doing. So you're asking us to vote on this without even knowing what the other half is doing. And I think we have to bring a little bit more transparency so everybody knows what is going on. I mean, we're really in the dark, and you want us to vote on this without knowing, I think is a big mistake. So those are my two comments. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Wayne Cedarquist?
Hi, good morning. My name is Wayne Cedarquist. I'm a pistachio grower here in Madera County. I have a couple of comments. One in reference to penalties and utilizing AeroWatch. My experience with AeroWatch last year, comparing their measured water and my metered water on blocks where I did have meters installed, was not good. In my worst case scenario, they reported about 1.5 acre feet per acre more water than I actually used, according to my electronic meters. I think there are some real problems there, no matter what fee structure is set up here. Measurement is crucial. I do suspect there are going to be some pretty good penalties coming up in the first couple of years. Second point I'd like to make is Sites Reservoir. Yes, that's expensive water, about 1,000 acres or $1,000 per acre foot. And a few months ago when that first came up, I was stunned and it's like, oh my gosh, not many people are really going to want to use this. But as I thought it through a little bit more, in my case, pistachios, I wouldn't be buying an acre foot per acre if I were able to put an additional 3 inches or a 1/4 acre foot onto each acre of my pistachios. That would make a big difference. And all of a sudden, $250 an acre foot, if I could double or triple that money in a heavier crop, that would be worthwhile. So that's it. A couple points I wanted to make. Thank you.
Thank you. Jack Rice?
Good morning. A couple minutes left of it. Thank you. The Jack Rice on behalf of the Madera Ag Water Association. I appreciate the county and the county staff grappling with the fee issue. It is like everything else related to SGMA and water in California. It's complicated, and the best policy choices aren't always absolutely clear. But we appreciate what Mrs. Agneson and the consultant team has done.
Could you speak a little clearer in your mic? It's fading away, buddy.
Sorry about that. Is that any better?
Yes.
Or is it just internet? All right, perfect. So while we appreciate what you're doing and what's been happening, everybody recognizes these fees are really challenging for farmers. And one thing to point out is, like, unlike a water district where the fees people are used to paying are to provide water, in essence, throughout the San Joaquin Valley, this is not specific to Madera, but SGMA fees are people paying to have their water cut back. When you're in an undistricted area, that's what you're paying for. It just makes it more challenging, a little more unpleasant for everyone, but farmers recognize that these fees are essential to ensuring that the groundwater management is kept local, and so the state doesn't step into the basin, to ensure that the groundwater sustainability plan can be implemented as designed. And so fees are key, and people recognize that, but that doesn't take away from they're complicated, they're new, and people do need time to understand them. And to that end, I appreciate that there's going to be a little bit of time to see what the new old rate proposal on a per acre basis, if that's the direction the county ends up going, seeing what that is. I think giving some time for farmers to understand and digest what's being proposed is key. We look forward to continuing to help farmers understand what these rate means and actually looking at the rate study and reviewing that when it's made available. Thank you.
Thank you, Jack. M. Brady?
Hi, this is Matt Brady. Just a quick comment on the penalties. So I totally understand the rationale for the replacement water charge, but on the additional $500 penalty that's just authorized by SGMA, I guess my question would be, is there currently an idea of how that would be allocated or what it would be allocated to? I would hope it would be to similar purposes as the replacement water charge and not just a punitive fund or penalty that goes into the general fund or something. So that's my comment. Thank you.
Thank you. Any others? Seeing none, back to you, Stephanie. Close the public hearing on this, and you could, hope you got them wrote down. I kind of wrote some down if you need help on any of them.
But Mr. Chairman, I just have a comment
Oh, yeah.
I'd like to make.
Yes.
Yeah.
Supervisor Poitras.
I've heard some comments from those in the public, and I'd just like to tell you a quick story. So, we've got 80 acres that's in the white area. So we've known for many, many years that the day was going to come when we would have to start reducing what we grew on that 80 acres. And this is the year. So in January, and so we just kind of like, okay, how many acres we need to take out to be in compliance? Because I don't want to pay a fee. I've done the math on the fee, and it doesn't make sense. I'm not one of those guys that walks into a building that's on fire and not expect to get burned. I'm going to get burned if I go over the allocation. So I get the deal that was sent out by Stephanie, just like everybody else did. It said urgent on the envelope. I opened it up. I looked at what we used last year for the allocation, and I go, oh, we used more than I thought we did based on AeroWatch. But I said, okay, so I did the math, and I figured out this year we have to take out 27 acres of trees to back in to what we used last year. So this week we're taking out 27 acres of trees, so we'll be farming 53 acres rather than 80 acres, so that I can be within compliance on the for the per acre or 28 inches and so forth. And so I'm willing to pay the fee that we're going to be assessing per acre, whatever that might be. And I've worked, I believe it's kind of an intuitive thing that somebody would do, is to reduce your acres so you don't pay a big penalty. I don't know. I mean, I don't think I'm the sharpest tool in the shed, but knowing that there's going to be some kind of a penalty coming up, guess what? I don't want to pay it because I can't afford to pay it. I'm going to be losing money by doing so. So I'm just not going to be marching ahead, like the charge of the Light Brigade into, a definite loss. So I just wanted to share that story. I understand it, and I've got the same information everybody else did. I'm not going to challenge the system. So I guess, and this may sound a little harsh, but I don't think I'm going to have a lot of sympathy for those who decide to continue marching forward and deliberately using more than their allocated water use. Thank you.
I don't either. So, okay, Stephanie.
Thank you. So just
go right down the line.
I can, if you would like.
I think it'd be better if it's okay with you guys. I got it wrote down that way. So, Mark Peters was first.
So there was a question on penalties. I mean, I think what Supervisor Poitras said is absolutely true. We are not intending to raise money with penalties. We are using the penalty as a penalty. We want people to operate within their allocation. There was another question from Matt Brady about where the penalty went. Your board would have discretion in terms of which GSA program that could fund, right? It could be additional funds for domestic well mitigation. It could be additional funds for land repurposing, but that would be your board's decision, and it would be the GSA account. It's
I think
staying
we've
within.
expressed that it should be statutorily used, though, that it's directed to the water programs, not.
We got to do that, though. That's what she's saying.
We need to do that.
Yeah, that's what she's saying.
Yeah.
Let's see, there were some questions about where other counties were on this. Madera County finds itself in a very unique position. We have many more acres than other counties. Other places have found ways to work together and form joint powers authorities and not leave the county with the largest water agency, essentially. So we are in a fairly unique position. There have been Prop 218s paying for GSP development, so that part has gone ahead. We haven't seen aggressive program development from counties. There are, I think, 5 different GSAs that have allocations and potentially penalties in place, like Pixley Irrigation District, Tulare Irrigation District. These are irrigation districts that have found they need to cap groundwater extraction. So we may be towards the front, but we're not the front. I think we do understand the magnitude of our work. That's why there is a pretty robust team of experts working on it. In terms of Mr. Dalton's question about additional water that is brought in, that would be a new category of water. It's not sustainable yield. It's not transitional water. In terms of Mr. Trebosh's question on recharge credits, your board has seen a proposal where there's proportional share of costs and benefits, and the benefit would be in a water credit. Mr. Wiles' question in terms of allocations. So if you had less than 80% of your farm unit irrigated, you have sustainable yield for the entirety, and then transitional water for just the irrigated portion if you're less than 80%. So that is what the rule is. However, I have visited and I'm making sure that we can get as much legally according to the resolution as possible for him.
Now, in the event that, is that as of the 2019?
June 8th of last year.
Yeah, I'm sorry, of 2020. But like if someone were to continue, like in Rob's case, he had 80 acres, takes it out by 27%. He still has the
allocation based
for the entire 80
That's right.
acres, right? It was just prior to if you were under that 20% threshold.
Yes. There was a question about IRRAWatch. I know some people do not like one measurement method. They are welcome to use a different one. And I think that should be our message all along. If you would like to meter, make sure the meters are installed correctly according to the manufacturer's specifications. You're not wedging the meter in between elbows, but read the manufacturer's guidance on that. Maintain the meter. And we are working on getting a list of folks who can go out and just do a check that that meter is installed correctly and check flow.
And they have to get those tested every once in a while too, because.
Absolutely. Particularly meters with moving parts slow over time. And I've not used the analogy, but it may be worth saying it's like replacing your bathroom scale, right? You thought you knew what it said until you had a new scale. It usually goes up. Are there any on your list, Supervisor?
No, I think you covered them all.
Okay.
That's
So-
very good.
Yeah.
So the direction from the board was to come back in 2 weeks with a rate structure that was fixed for a 5-year period.
2 or 3, I want to make sure I can be here, that's fine.
Okay. Well, I will check.
You guys?
3.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, now, at that time, we need to have this done before the end of the fiscal year. So at that time, when we come back in 3 weeks, we need your board to either give direction to move ahead and have Raftellus complete the rate study. That would allow the public to read it, inspect it, and vote after a 45-day period or not. But we would need to make a decision then.
Well, let's do it 2 weeks. If I can't come down, I'll do Zoom. That's better, if you've got time to do it in 2 weeks.
I think the time is fine on our end.
Okay.
And one of the questions I think that was missed was on regarding the voting for something when we didn't know everything about what was going on elsewhere. This is only in regards to the areas within our GSA that would be voting on it for themselves. It doesn't have any impact on other GSAs, and no other GSAs can have impact on what we do. Is that correct?
That's right. We are looking for those who are within the county GSA to vote on this after the noticing period.
They're the only ones.
They're the only ones.
Right. Jay?
Chairman, I was just going to suggest that probably 3 weeks would be better because
Okay.
2 weeks is
That's a
pretty
little quick.
pretty close turnaround for you.
Right.
So I think everybody, including yourself, will be better able to stay with their seat in their chair if we do it on March 30th. If that date works for everyone, we'd like to verify that now, and then we'll work with the clerk to get
I'm
then
fine
county
with it.
council to get that scheduled.
And also only the people that would be subject to the rate would be voting on it. It would not be
That's
people
right.
who are not subject to it. I think that's important to note.
Let's do it the 29th, because the 30th I have a doctor's appointment at 9 o'clock. The 29th is a Tuesday. We haven't got a regular board meeting, so we could just do it that day.
Yes,
That's
that
okay
date
with
works
me.
for
I will need
staff.
to check with Raftellus as well, but
I have a quick question.
Yeah, let's finish this date first.
Yeah.
Yes, that date works for staff, Chairman.
Okay, 29th.
This may impact that decision, though.
Okay,
Yeah,
Supervisor Rogers.
we need an understanding of the economic impact on the basic farm. And I don't know that we've had any economic impact study at all concerning these. You know what? I know that's a big ask, but I was asked that by a local farmer, and has there been an impact study on?
so there was an economic analysis that was in the GSP originally.
Originally,
There has not been an economic analysis that is specific to this fee, but
updated with the fee and involved in it. That's
But-
what I'm concerned.
I mean, the fee is paying for projects that are in the GSP, so the information's been out there. We could do some additional looking at what potential costs look at. For example, we showed the 100-acre cost last week.
I think
something like that.
Analyzing it on a level, a small level of the impact of what it would be to a farm is really critical. Like Rob said, we're selling this to the farmer. If it doesn't work for them, I mean.
Well, and keep
What are
in
we gonna
mind
say?
that commodity prices are really important. Part of what's
Sure.
making this a difficult discussion is commodity prices right
Do a
now.
couple of scenarios, maybe.
Okay, we can.
Like a 5-year average,
We can look at it.
including
We
this
just-
year.
I don't want to hold up the other part of it first, but we can keep looking.
But this is a critical component of this decision. If we kill the farm that we're trying to save through all the fees, what good is it?
Well, I think
That's the
there's
whole
a
thing.
much.
Kill them without no water, too.
Well, that's the fact, but you got to find a balance, though. You got to find a balance in how you ramp. And how you ramp it is going to make a difference in survival. That's the whole key. Like Michelle said earlier, even though we're comparing this to water districts in a form, and it's not a true form, it's not a true model, but they're paying a fee that they aren't paying at the water district to get that out of the ground. So
And
that's
I
part
would
of that
say
as
to
well.
that, yet
Yeah.
would be a key word, right? One of the things we heard consistently in 2018 when we were sharing out groundwater sustainability plans is that everybody anticipated costs going up, not just the county GSA to pay for projects.
Right.
For sure. No matter what. Okay. Any other comments from the board members? Thank you, Rob.
Thank you. Thank you,
I'm
Rob.
going to adjourn the meeting and enjoy the rest of the week, everybody, and let's hope for more rain.
Thank you.
Thank you.